Hello, welcome once again to Urban X-Files. Today we're going to talk about the film The Exorcist, talking about the origins of The Exorcist and what give William Peter Blatty the inspiration behind the cult classic The Exorcist. Now, the cult film The Exorcist terrified the world in more than 40 years ago, but the 1973 film was about the possession of a 12-year-old little girl called Raven. Now, it's a story that has gone on to inspire many films and TV shows, and we have the author William Peter Blatty to thank for bringing the Exorcist cult classic to the big screen. In 1949, the author William, he sat reading a newspaper article about a Maryland boy named Roland Doe to protect this kid's identity. Now, the aspects of the Exorcist, the fictitious story, based on the true story of the film. It was called upon several services of the Catholic priests who were able to perform the rite of exorcism on this little girl. Now, it was one of 3 exorcisms that had been sanctioned by the Catholic Church, more likely in the Vatican, and it obviously passed down to the church superiors in the States and so on. Pardon me. Now, it was they had to change quite a few details of the story. For example, the real case of the Exorcist, the possession of Roland Doe, was a male, and in the film it was about a female called Regan, and the true story of The Exorcist started sometime in the 1940s in Washington, DC, and it was a 13-year-old boy, and he was absolutely devastated by the loss of his auntie, who was a really big inspiration in this young lad's life. Now, she taught him many things over the years, and she was a spiritualist, and she also taught him divination and things like the Ouija board. Now, in early January of 1949, shortly after his aunt had passed away, he began to experience some strange things. Like in his bedroom, he would hear scratching sounds coming from the floors and the walls of his room. There was random bits of water and strange liquid that would drip from pipes and walls, and you may have heard where rooms are raining and yet there's no source of this water that's leaking. And the most terrifying was that Roland's mattress would vibrate and move. Now, this obviously disturbed Roland's family, and they sought out many different aspects of help and experts that they could. The family had consulted doctors, psychiatrists, a local Lutheran minister, but none of them were able to help. Now, the minister had suggested that the family seek the assistance of the Jesuits, and there was a Father Hughes, who was a local Catholic priest, had asked his superiors the permission to perform an exorcism on the young lad in February of 1949. However, the priest had to stop the rite of exorcism when Roland had broken off a piece of spring from the mattress that he'd been tied down to, and he'd lashed out and he'd hit the priest across his shoulders. Now, a few days later, the boy would have scratches appear on the body, and one of the scratch marks had formed the word Louis, which indicated to Ronald's mum that the family needed to go to St. Louis, or St. Louis, I think it's pronounced, from the States, where the family had relatives, in order to find a way to save their son. Now, a cousin of the family who was attending St. Louis University at the time, she put the family in touch with Father Walter Halloran and Reverend William Bowden. After consulting with the university's president, these two priests agreed to perform an exorcism on young Roland with the help of assistants. The men had gathered at the residence, strangely called Roanoke Drive. There's another mystery with Roanoke for those of you that I'll cover that in another story. Anyway, so yeah, now according to the reports, they noticed a pattern in Roland's behaviour. He was calm and normal during the day, but then at night, after settling in for bed, he would begin to have strange behaviour, which would include screaming, outbursts, swearing, all different things, and many of these aspects had been taken from the how it happened had been put into the film The Exorcist. Now, Ronald would also enter trance-like states, and he'd start making strange sounds in a different type of voice, and the priest supposedly saw mysterious flying objects in the boy's presence, and they said that he would react violently when he saw any sacred object presented, like a cross, the crucifix, and holy oil, and statues of Mary, and so forth. At one point during this exorcism, Bowden reportedly saw an X appear in the scratches on Ronald's chest, and the priests believed that to be signified by the number 10, Roman numericals. And in another incident, a pitchfork-shaped pattern of red lines moved from the boy's thigh and snaked down towards his ankle. And these types of things happened every night for over a month, and they were witnessed by many people, and they believed that this was because he was possessed with the X, the 10 demons. So the two priests never give up, and they continued the exorcism night after night and night after night. And then on the evening in March, the exorcism reached an unhealthy new level. Roland ended up peeing all over his bed and began shouting and cursing at these priests. Now, Ronald's parents had enough, so they took him to the Alexian Brothers Hospital in St. Louis for more invasive and serious treatment. Excuse me. Now, the two priests, they continued to work with the hospital and various things, and then on April the 18th, they said a miracle had happened in Ronald's room at the hospital. It was Monday after Easter, and he'd awoke with some seizures, having fits, and he yelled at the priest saying that the devil, Satan, would always be with him. Now, the priests had laid holy relics, crucifixes, medals, and rosaries on the boy. And later that evening, the priests said a prayer to Saint Michael. Saint Michael is God's archangel who fought off Satan. Someone I really am inspired by, Saint Michael. I have a lot of, and my wife does too. And Raphael, who's a healer. Now they shouted to Satan in this boy, saying that Saint Michael would fight for Ronald's soul. And 7 minutes later, Ronald came out of his trance and simply said, "He's gone." And the boy recounted how he had a vision that Saint Michael had vanquished Satan on a great battlefield and sent him back down to the depths of hell. And as far as we are aware, there are no more documented instances of these strange occurrences and behaviour after that moment. And the lad went on to live a completely normal life, and from that moment on, obviously, other than the film The Exorcist, there was nothing else mentioned about it. Now, no one would have ever known about The Exorcist of this poor little lad if it hadn't have been for the author who read the article and then went on to make the cult classic film The Exorcist. Now, in 1971, an author named the author William Peter Blatty, who we've mentioned before, had created his best-selling novel. Now, the movie took many aspects of what happened during the exorcism and the story of the poor lad, and put it into the film. So they turned Roland into Reagan, which is the 12-year-old little girl. And the story also takes place in Washington DC as well, but in the Georgetown area. So it's somewhat true to life, to what happened to poor Roland, or Ronald, whatever we're going to call him for the sake of this, because his name was protected to protect the identity of the kid. Now, in the film, there was scratches, shouting, spitting, red lines, and various things which were mimicked from the film that happened to the poor lad. Things like in the film, Reagan vomited green like ectoplasm or something, but this didn't happen to Ronald. And the boy didn't use a crucifix to masturbate with neither. These were just added into the film for obviously shock value, because that had never been put into a cinema film before. That had been released into the public eye. Now, following the exorcism of Roland, though, the family moved. They moved back to their hometown, and they clearly believe that Saint Michael the Archangel had saved his life, and he wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for Saint Michael coming in to throw the devil back down to the depths of hell. Now, Bowden, on the other hand, died in 1983, and he was one of the priests after serving in the church for most of his life, and he lived until sorry, let me go back a bit then. So the room in the hospital was boarded up and sealed after the exorcism, so it was never used again or anything like that. And the hospital was torn down in 1978, and the house in which Roland had lived in was left empty, abandoned, and it's just been totaled now, as far as I'm aware. So it was abandoned in the 60s, and it's been left ever since. Now, experts believe that there's some truth to this story. Now, after the film, the after part of the film, they believe there was a lot of the film's cursed. It brought death to many of the actors, and strange things happened on set, and stuff that wasn't nice. So in the production of The Exorcist, it was riddled with problems from the start. So as soon as they started filming, stuff started to go wrong. The actual set of the house where Reagan lived was actually, it just burnt down when a bird had flew into a circuit box. Now, eerily, the only part that was untouched by the flames was the room that they used for the filming of the actual exorcism scenes. That was the only room that was left untouched, which people found that very, very strange. Now, this had set the production further back, so it was going to be longer before it was released. And it was hit by more tragedies when a series of deaths had rocked the cast and the crew. Actors Jack McGowan and Vasily Maliaros, whose characters also die in the film, they both sadly passed away before the filming had finished. Elsewhere, like the stars Linda Blair and Max von Sydow, lost members of their family during the shoot as well, which is very, very sad. sad thing to happen. Also as well, Blair, the on-screen mum of Regan, had suffered serious injuries during the production through falls on the set and various accidents that had happened. And it was also said that the case had followed the movie to its release date in Boxing Day in 1973. Now, over a period of like major religious festival gives you some indication to the studio's intent to spark controversy and debate, which was a shock factor, and which is why the film was meant to have gone on to have the success it did. The Warner Brothers press office spread speculation that the curse was done prior to the release, so it was a hot topic in global media when it hit the cinemas. I remember people talking about, I mean, I wasn't born when The Exorcist had come out, but I remember growing up as a child. It was a terrifying story, so no one had watched it, and it was banned from a lot of people's houses, especially Catholic families. And I remember getting told that people were collapsing during the showing of The Exorcist in cinemas, and they were giving like handing out crucifixes at the cinema to keep people feeling safe and stuff. Which is a bit mad. Now, in Rome, fans were forced to travel to the cinema in different states or towns or whatever from it. Like there was a torrential downpour as the film began, and lightning had reportedly struck the church opposite where this cinema was. So it was no, they weren't meant to watch it because it was such a diabolical film. Now, the woman who passed out was meant to have broken her jaw, so she intended to sue the studio, Warner Brothers studio, and St. John's ambulance were called to attend screenings of the film through people's like blacking out and dropping and terrified and whatnot. So that's why they say the film was as cursed as it was. So yeah, that is the true story of The Exorcist and where it originated from. So yeah, there's quite a few sad tales that come along from The Exorcist, but as it stands, the film was given a low budget, and I think it gone over budget and ended up costing something like just under $2 million, which is a relatively low budget, but it soon made that money back. And I think up to now it's grossed nearly £250 million in revenue for the cinema industry. So it was a cult classic success, which obviously led to a prequel and other films which follow on from it, and then it inspired other people to write about similar things and then make more films about possession. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's story. Say your prayers and take care, and see you in the next video. Peace.